Cashless Sweden's warning to Australia. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I have my stein of coffee and I thought we'd have a look at this article from the ABC discussing what Australia can learn from Sweden's move to a cashless society. Now, I've discussed the cash transaction bans that have been put forward to our parliament here in Australia, where essentially it'll be illegal to spend $10,000 or more in a cash transaction with any large business. I was concerned that this was a fundamental restriction on our liberties and our freedoms, and more bureaucracy and red tape that was not even necessary because the number of people making these bloody transactions was so low. It was based on anecdotal evidence from, town hall meetings where people said, oh, some people get a cash deal. I mean, stupid and ludicrous. It's going to add more costs. And we saw what happened in the bushfire when so many people have gotten out of the habit of carrying cash. They ended up robbing petrol stations and grocery stores. The Australian way. Bloody disgusting, really. Just shows you how ill-prepared people are. So what Australia can learn from Sweden's move to a cashless society. So let's have a look at this. As Australia flirts with the idea of a cashless society after the pandemic, Sweden has a warning. Be careful what you wish for. Sweden is often cited as the most cashless country in the world. It was already well on the way to digital-only payments before the pandemic was declared, and the virus has only served to hasten the demise of cash. If you walk in the city in Stockholm nowadays, who'd be brave enough to do that in certain parts of the city? But that's for a different topic. Most of the stores will have signs saying they don't accept cash anymore. And honestly, I've encountered that today. I've had my NAS drive has filled up. Apparently, because Heise says I produce a lot of content, I thought, okay, I'll take it off the work project drive and I'll put it on just the family drive where Rachel puts photos and things. And yeah, I filled it up, 100% drive capacity. So I went and ordered another little NAS, got some hard drives, and I'll pick it up after I finish this video. And I thought, you know what, I'll go pay cash. But no, couldn't do it. They won't accept cash in store. And they're claiming it's to do with the pandemic. Although they didn't charge the surcharge for the credit card, which they normally do, which I was happy with. For a change. Anyway, back to this. I'll do a thank you video for everyone, for all the supporters of the channel, because that's where your donations are going to buy equipment. I remember when my first computer only had a 40 meg hard drive and I was the boss back with my 286, Thumbs up if you know how to use DOS. Anyway, back to the article, enough rambling. So Nicholas Arvidsson, an associate professor at Sweden's Royal Institute of Technology, referring to the lack of cash. If you're one of the many Australians who now prefer to use a card over cash, this might not sound like such a bad thing. But, he explains, there are now concerns Sweden went too hard too early and the rapid switch can have unintended consequences. So Sweden's quick switch. Sweden has undergone a remarkable and comparatively rapid shift away from cash as its governments and central banks left it to the market to decide what worked best, which is fine. I like the market deciding because there are benefits that benefit businesses. Should offer discounts. They should offer discounts to not having to deal with cash. It saves them money. They don't need to go to the bank. They don't need to deposit it. They shouldn't charge you a premium for it. Banks had no interest in keeping physical currency alive as they make no profit on cash purchases and ATMs are costly to operate. In fact, Mr. Arvidsson said it was now difficult to even find an ATM outside a major city in Sweden. It's become a big problem for rural areas, he said. Also, somewhere around 60% of the bank retail offices are not providing cash handling services anymore. Wow, that's crazy. That is crazy. While the majority of Swedes are happy to trash the cash, Mr. Arvidsson said there'd been a growing backlash to the move among hard-hit communities, particularly the elderly and disabled, who have struggled with the transition to a predominantly digital model. And there's the thing also, you spend more. You spend more when you're not holding the cash in your hands. When you just tap the card, you spend more. Oh yeah, I'll get that coffee, I'll get that Snickers bar, okay, I'll buy that. Psychological. But then again, you know, people are using Afterpay for medicine, so it's, yeah, that's a whole other concern. He said there was even evidence some people were having to forego buying things because they couldn't access cash. Such was the problem, the Swedish government was forced to step in and pass a new regulation that came into effect on January 1 and require banks to provide a minimum level of cash service. The issue, Mr. Arvidsson said, was the speed at which Sweden moved, and he urged Australia to learn from this. Australia should prepare people for a digital society in all its aspects, including payments, he said. Or we can just keep using cash as well. There is something that the government in Sweden did not do. In Sweden in the 20s and 30s, when the savings banks movement was started and people started to get money from their jobs instead of perhaps just getting food, the banks had information campaigns to make people understand what money was and what the bank account was. In the 20s and 30s, everyone. I think we need something similar now. Australia could be cashless in 2 years. So why are they pushing this CashBan legislation through? Why are they even bothering? All the energy, all the roadshows, all the Senate inquiries. You can have a look at the videos on my channel here, particularly when it passed through the House of Reps. And that was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. You had politicians debating, giving speeches, criticizing the cash ban, raising important issues to an empty room. Kato was talking about it, there was no one there. And then they all toddled in, including my member, and they just voted. Some of them didn't even know what they voted for. Representative democracy, guys, you know. Some of these people, it's not surprising why we think they're on the gravy train, is it? So, the Reserve Bank's 2019 Consumer Payment Survey released in March found that in the space of a decade, cash went from the dominant form of payment to now barely cracking a quarter of transactions. And here we can see, I mean, there you go, there's cash, credit cards, other, and debit cards. But it's not all consumer driven. Last year, the federal government proposed laws to ban payments of $10,000 and more, threatening jail sentences of up to 2 years for people who didn't obey. And there you go. I mean, it's ludicrous, utterly ludicrous, when we're already moving away from it. And there's arguments that it will lead to, you know, trap us in the system for negative interest. But you know, you can look at the IMF where they're proposing a dual currency system where you've got physical cash and digital cash, and there's an exchange rate between the two, so they can just force the negative interest rate onto you even if you're hoarding cash. And I think they'd do that. They're really going hard that way. Meanwhile, cryptocurrencies, once the dream of Silicon Valley tech heads, are now being seriously considered by governments around the world. Well, yeah, they would love cryptocurrencies. And I honestly don't think our governments will adopt any of the big names. They'll just get their own one so they can track every single thing. You know. And in recent years, the likes of India and the European central banks have phased out higher value notes. It's led global firm research and markets to estimate that Australia could become the Asia Pacific's first cashless society by 2022. The Commonwealth Bank thinks we'll probably get there by 2026. I mean, there you go. You got tap and go even at the Surf Lifesavers, guys. And yet for some Australians, cash is still key. The value of Australian currency in circulation has been trending upwards in recent years, for example. I think people are hoarding it, guys. And while the pandemic was declared, some wealthy Australians rushed to the bank and withdrew huge sums, in some cases taking out millions of dollars. Then there are the lowest income and older Australians who still rely on cash. 500,000 Australians don't bank online, and my mother's probably one of them. I'm trying to encourage her to get into it for the advantages of just paying your bills, but she still rocks up, gives me money, and I pay certain bills for her. You know. In April, the Australian Banking Association reported there were more than 500,000 customers who actively used a passbook account or transaction account with no linked debit card. This means they pay for goods and services using EFTPOS, using cash or EFTPOS cards, and they don't have debit capabilities and are unable to shop online or over the phone. In response, the ABA said banks would issue a record number of MasterCard and Visa debit cards and offered assurances the online world was safe. A significant number of older Australians still operate passbook accounts with which they withdraw cash at the bank branch and do not have the card linked to that account, Council of Aging CEO Ian Vates said. During the pandemic period, these people have found purchasing goods and services difficult when some retailers have stopped accepting cash. And, I mean, you couldn't even order anything online, guys, and get it delivered. As for Mr. Abidson, he said the solution to these issues was to make sure consumers had a say in what the future outcome looked like. Well, judging by the huge number of submissions to the cash transaction, or the restrictions on the use of cash bill, and how they were completely all dismissed, I can't see that happening here in Australia. There doesn't seem the political will to listen to the people. But he's right. I think it's really about preparing for the development and putting the decision in the hands of consumers, he said. And also to make them powerful, to actually tell the banks and other providers to give them the services they need. So here we have it, everyone. Some lessons from Sweden regarding going to cashless. What do you think? Do you still enjoy using cash? Are you like me and been going out of your way to use cash during this pandemic just to be a bit of a bastard? Maybe that's just how I am. Or do you prefer just holding those notes and coins in your hands and knowing what you're spending, that you're not going into debt for it, that you're not incurring a credit card transaction fee for every little penny you spend? As always, please let me know your thoughts and opinions below. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and you want to support the content here, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us via our affiliate links at Amazon or eBay or Independent Reserve and Kucoin. You can buy our merch from HeiseSays. You can use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or you can support us via PayPal. Take care, guys, and I will see you in the next episode.